Hello everyone and welcome back to the Timeline Astrology podcast. This is Gary and this is all about phantom signs. So this is something that I've just come up with recently. It is something I think about all the time, of course. I am an astrology obsessive, so I always think about astrology. But this is a new concept, and this notion that, or let's say this question, are the tropical signs phantom signs? That's the question. I'm going to give you some examples of reasons why I believe the answer to that is yes. So I'm not just plucking this out of thin air. Now, I want to, in a way, confess something here, and that is, and maybe this is more relevant to people who follow the tropical zodiac more than the sidereal, but I have been primarily a sidereal astrologer for the last 30 years. 30 years ago, I got introduced to Vedic astrology by my teacher, and it was sidereal. And in that 30 years, I've been following the sidereal primarily. Now, it doesn't mean I haven't kept an eye on the tropical, and in more recent years, more so for reasons I'm going to explain now. But in that 30 years, there was only maybe 1.5 years, I think it was, where I decided, because there was a movement of Vedic astrologers towards the tropical zodiac, using it more and more, I thought there must be something in this, because of course there are millions of astrologers around the world, Western astrologers primarily, who use the tropical signs, so there must be something in this, surely. And I thought, I want to investigate this, and I don't want to do it half-arsed either. I want to really see if it works. So I decided for a year and a half to completely drop the sidereal. I wasn't doing readings at the time, I don't think. I don't know what was happening in my personal life, but I was basically experimenting with the tropical zodiac along with Vedic astrology. And I gave it my best shot. I really did. Now, I don't need to get into all of the nuance in why that does not work, but let me just give you just one example of why it doesn't work. Simply, if you know anything about Vedic astrology and you try and use the tropical zodiac and then delineate a person's timeline, which is what my obsession is, and correlate the nakshatras and the dasha, more especially that we mostly use, Vimshotri, with a person's life events, you'll straight away see it doesn't line up. It just doesn't line up. I mean, it's not like, I wonder, am I this sign? Or I can see that I've got those traits, because I'm going to get into a bit of that here. It's nothing like that. It's literally what is happening in your life, and there's no debating what's happening and when. And when I did that for a year and a half, it just would not line up. It not line up in my chart or anyone else's chart. So that's the main point I want to actually use here. Besides that, though, I do think that the tropical signs have some merit. I mean, I'm not saying it's completely useless. I do think it's important for some things. It's just, as we'll see now, it's important to recognize what are we using it for and to differentiate between it and the sidereal zodiac. Now, this is a point I keep making over and over again, and it's one of my pet peeves, is that when tropical astrologers simply say the sign without saying it's tropical, it really annoys me, because I have to, as a sidereal astrologer, say sidereal astrology for the general public who don't know what that means, or need to be made aware that you're using the sidereal. And then I think, well, wait a minute, why do I have to use sidereal Aries, sidereal Taurus, and so on? Why doesn't a tropical astrologer have to say tropical Aries, tropical Taurus, and so on? Because that's actually more important. What I'm saying when I say Aries is the star sign Aries, the constellation Aries. When a tropical astrologer says Aries, they don't even mean the stars. They mean the season of Aries. And that's why, one of the reasons why I think that a lot of tropical Western astrologers are using that phrase, season, Aries season, Taurus season, that's one reason I believe. So it's in a way to try and differentiate it from the stars. But it's not enough. You need to actually say tropical Aries, tropical Taurus, and so on. So anyway, that's my pet peeve out of the way. Going back to the signs themselves, in terms of, apart from whether you use it in tropical, Western, or Vedic, sidereal, or you mix and match, whatever you do, what about the actual signs themselves? Because what are they? Now, I wrote an article about this recently in defense of the sidereal zodiac, because this was a response to the astrologer Cam White, a Western tropical astrologer based in the US. And he put out a post, and on his Instagram, I think it was, and he was just very matter-of-factly saying, you know, sidereal astrology is not right. It's like they don't know what they're talking about. He's very forthright and very direct, and he sounds very convincing, and he's very confident on camera. And a student of Vedic astrology emailed me, a student that's halfway through a course in Vedic astrology, emailed me their concern about this, because they were a bit like, oh, what he's saying makes sense, please help here. And I was like taken aback, because first of all, if you're on a course, you obviously should be learning what the tropical is versus what the sidereal is. And even if you do, and you know then what those differences are, and his comments are going to throw you, I was really taken aback, and I really felt the need then to write about what the sidereal astrology is and versus tropical. So tropical is basically the seasons. It's nothing more than the seasons. And it's only the seasons based on the northern hemisphere. It's not even relevant for the southern hemisphere. Because if you say Aries season when the sun moves into Aries, tropical Aries, remember, on March 20th or thereabouts, it could be March 21st, it depends, then we're going to say Aries season for the northern hemisphere. But that's not springtime on the southern hemisphere. And so then you're not going, astrologers on the southern hemisphere in Australia and different places are not going to say Aries season. They're not going to use that phrase. So it's only tropical that have this problem, because the sidereal signs, the star signs, are the signs for all the planet. So you don't have that issue. That's point one. Tropical are seasonal, and only seasonal really for the northern hemisphere. For the southern hemisphere, you either need to flip it, which a lot of astrologers recommend you do, and these astrologers are from the southern hemisphere, so that's not a coincidence. So either you flip it or you just use it as this sort of, I don't know. I really know what it is if you're not actually looking at the stars, apart from the one star, our sun. It is just looking at the amount of light you're getting at any time of year. And again, because that's different for both hemispheres, it doesn't really work for the world. Sidereal signs, literally stars, sidereal, means that you're looking at the constellations. And one of the arguments that Cam White put forth is that, well, if you're going to look at the constellations, then why aren't you looking at the actual constellations, or what some astrologers call true constellational astrology, where you're looking at the actual sizes of the constellations? First of all, these are all made up. And this is what we're going to get into here in terms of phantom signs. It's all made up anyway. They're stories that were told over millennia, and they get embedded in our psyche. It's like the subconscious stories that we have that are made more conscious through the telling of astrology stories. You cannot say that Virgo is this size versus Pisces, which is this size, because you're just looking at stars in the sky and drawing pictograms in the sky. And so you can't really say, okay, this star extends this far, so therefore this sign, quote unquote, because it's not a sign, it's a constellation, is this big versus this constellation, which is this big. This is not how it works. I mean, how do we even do that? It doesn't make sense to me at all. Whereas when you look at astrology and what it's actually used for, and what it was always used for in ancient times, was a timing tool, like a watch, like a clock. And what do you do at 12 hours a day? You make equal hours in the day. So with a zodiac, you calculate the zodiac belt with equal measures of 12 30-degree signs. That's what astrology signs are. So when we say signs, and when I say star signs, it means a 30-degree portion of the zodiac. It's not bigger or smaller. It's not divorced from the stars and based on the amount of light that you get in the year. It's based on the stars, dividing it up equally. So I just don't understand why this is an issue for astrologers. Like, this is astrologers and people who are studying astrology having an issue with this concept. It's so simple in another way, and it's made so complicated. And I think the reason why it's made so complicated is because people who follow a certain system for years need complicated rules, need complicated all kinds of things to make this work, to make it fit, because it quite obviously doesn't fit. So my confession, this is a big confession, coming from a Scorpio. I've got lots to confess if I had to confess things, but my big confession here is that I have been infiltrating the tropical zodiac. I have been infiltrating tropical Western astrology circles for the last few years, for not necessarily consciously doing so, I would say, but certainly with an intention behind my engagement to see if it works. I mean, this is what I was doing it for. I wanted to see, wait a minute, how are you making this work? And my conclusion after some years, I mean, I've in the last few years been quite involved with tropical astrologers. For some years of being involved with it, I've just realized that it just doesn't work for Vedic astrology, number one. That's the one thing I can say for sure. Number two, I don't even know if it works for tropical astrology because, again, as we get into this phantom signs concept, I really believe that it's a story that you tell yourself and you're going to make it fit. And I'm going to give you examples of this and how this actually works in practice as well. So I don't believe that the tropical zodiac is the correct zodiac to use, is my point. And for somebody who wants to be open-minded about it and sees the relevance of tropical astrology in one way in terms of maybe the seasons for the Northern Hemisphere, and that's about it, or just the concept of light and how much light you're getting, that's as far as I would go with it. It really is. I don't think it should go any further than that. And I think if you're going to call signs the same name as you call the sidereal star signs, it's not going to work. You need to call them something else. And this is, as I wrote in the article, something that Western tropical astrologer Patrick Watson does suggest in his article, A Way to Reconcile the Tropical and Sidereal Zodiacs. He suggests that astrologers come up with new names for the tropical signs. And I actually think this is something that will happen in the future, in future generations, as the two zodiacs drift further and further apart. And after they're no longer just one sign behind the other, in other words, tropical Aries is no longer sidereal Pisces, but actually becomes sidereal Aquarius, then you're talking about the difference between Aries and Aquarius. There's no overlap at all at that stage in a few hundred years. So it's like astrologers in the future are not going to be able to keep calling Aries season Aries. They're going to have to come up with something else. They're going to have to at least call it tropical Aries versus sidereal. The other thing to say as well about this is that it's all about who speaks the loudest, who has the biggest voice, who is the biggest group. Because as I wrote in the article, the Astrological Association in the UK, which has members all over the world, are primarily tropical astrologers. I did go and I did give a talk once or twice, actually 2 years. And they do invite other astrologers from other backgrounds and from sidereal background to talk. But last year, for example, I didn't see not one sidereal astrologer. There might have been one, actually. I can just think of one. And even that one, the talk wasn't sidereal, it was tropical. So basically, they're primarily tropical. But it could have been oh so different, because in the beginning days of the association, one of the astrologers, Roy Firebrace, I think his name is pronounced Firebrace, was a sidereal astrologer. He was one of the main founding members. But he, of course, wanted the sidereal zodiac to be used, but he didn't get his way, essentially. There were more people who wanted to use the tropical zodiac, and that was eventually what they picked up. So it's basically a group of people coming together, deciding the fate of astrology. And for this reason, and forevermore, at least in the Astrological Association, but it has a huge reach, it's tropical astrology that has impressed upon the world in more modern times. But even going beyond that, going back 2,000 years, this concept that I want to come up with here around the phantom signs is that over 2,000 years ago, the two were aligned. And this is what's so confusing for people, because over 2,000 years ago, when the sun entered tropical Aries around March 20th, 21st, then it was actually also the star sign Aries at that time, but it's drifted every 72 years, it drifts backwards 1 degree. And so over 2,000 years have passed, and now it's drifted all the way back to 6 degrees of Pisces, when the sun is meant to move into the first degree of tropical Aries it's actually at 6 degrees or thereabouts, depending on what ayanamsha you use, whatever calculation you use. It's really going to be between 5 and 6 of Pisces. That will keep on drifting back to Aquarius in a few hundred years, and it will actually be Aquarius when the sun enters tropical Aries on the spring equinox for the northern hemisphere. The sun will actually appear to be in the star sign Aquarius. It's currently in the star sign Pisces. But what's so interesting about this, and this is another thing to say before I even get into this phantom sign concept, is that when you look at the sunrise on the spring equinox on the northern hemisphere, what are you looking at? What star sign are you seeing? You are not seeing Pisces, because the sun is in Pisces. So of course, if the sun is rising, you're not seeing the sign Pisces. You're not seeing any signs. What you're seeing, at dusk or at dawn is Aquarius. And this is another reason why perhaps people assume that we're in the age of Aquarius already, and we're not. And this is yet another point to make. And this is a point that Cyril Fagan, the very famous sidereal astrologer, made, is that if you, as a tropical Western astrologer, are going to talk about the ages, you have to know what you're therefore saying. If you say that we're heading into, or we're already into somehow, the age of Aquarius, it's not for another few hundred years, but we're heading into the age of Aquarius when the sunrise on the spring equinox will be in the star sign Aquarius. It's not there yet. But if you're saying that, even as a tropical Western astrologer, you are actually arguing a point for the sidereal zodiac by saying that. So don't use that term, heading into the age of Aquarius, if you are making an argument for the tropical zodiac. You're making two different arguments at the same time. You're saying that, okay, I'm a tropical astrologer using the seasons, the signs as seasons. And then I'm going to talk about this age of Aquarius, which is sidereal, which is star-based. Which are you doing? So that's a huge point to make here. So many points. But I want to get into this concept of phantom signs. This notion, this concept of a phantom limb is quite fascinating because, of course, the concept is simply if you lose a limb, and this was a concept that was written about in 1872 by Silas Weir. I don't know if that's a correct pronunciation of his name, but this is a quote from him. Nearly every man who loses a limb carries about him a constant or inconstant phantom of the missing member, a sensory ghost of that much of himself, and sometimes a most inconvenient presence, faintly felt at times, but ready to be called up to his perception by a blow, a touch, or a change of wind. And it was reading that I really kind of struck me that, wow, that's literally almost like what the tropical signs are like. It's like this bygone era of when astrologers in the past came up with the delineations for each sign and what they meant. And since then, I mean, over 2,000 years, these stories have been embedded in our psyche. And therefore, it's like all of these stories connected to the signs anyway make that stick. And so it's like a phantom sign. It's like it sticks around. And this is something I saw literally at a conference once when I was giving a talk, and I was talking about the difference between sidereal and tropical. And I came to a slide where I asked the audience, which sign do you think I am, Sagittarius or Scorpio? And so everybody said Sagittarius in the group. And why do you think that is? Because I'm tropical Sagittarius. I'm sidereal Scorpio. My star sign is Scorpio. The reason why all of them in the group said Sagittarius is because that's what they're looking for. Because they're tropical astrologers. So this is what I mean by phantom signs. It's like a bygone era. It's an expression of a sign for sure. It's a tropical sign, but it's correlated with sidereal signs as well. So for me, it's sidereal Scorpio. And if you are trained in sidereal astrology, you'll be looking at sidereal. So I found that interesting because I would be really curious to do that same exercise with people who didn't know me in a Vedic astrology group or in a sidereal astrology group and ask the group, which do you think I am, Sagittarius or Scorpio? So at any rate, I want to give you an example of this in a very personal way. And this is a personal friend of mine who for years was considering themselves as a sidereal Cancer rising. So if you just listen to this for a minute, because it's really important to get this point. They consider themselves, based on the time of birth that they were given by their mother, I believe, a sidereal Cancer rising. It was only recently, so all of these years, this is a friend, by the way, and a friend who studies astrology. All of these years, they had thought of themselves as sidereal Cancer, and I thought of them, therefore, as sidereal Cancer. And I know quite a bit of astrology. So I read their chart also many times, having conversations as we study together and all of these things. So to me, they were sidereal Cancer through and through. I saw everything that they did as a Cancerian. I saw their behavior, the way that they nurtured other people, the way they were interested in nourishment itself. There's so many cliche things we could say about it, but essentially not just Cancer rising, but the whole chart. I saw them as that chart. So it's not just a rising sign, it's the whole chart. This is the main point. It was like a phantom sign because, lo and behold, just a year ago, not that long ago, they decided for some reason, now, after many years of studying, that they were going to seek out if this indeed was their right time. And they went to the births records at the hospital and decided, okay, I'm going to get my time now. I don't know why they didn't do that before. I assumed that they had done that before. They went to get their time, and lo and behold, it was an earlier time, and their true sidereal sign is Gemini. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because this is the whole thing about tropical and sidereal. Do not forget, tropical signs correlate with the sidereal sign previous. Just the previous sign. This is what makes it so complicated, which is why future astrologers in hundreds and thousands of years are not going to have this issue. It's only our generations that have this issue because it's the sign before. And so if you mark a time down that is a bit late and you were born a bit earlier, it's going to be the previous sign. But even if you don't do that and you consider yourself the tropical sign, it is the previous sidereal sign. So even if this person considered themselves as initially with the right time a sidereal Gemini, which they do now, and I'm going to explain a bit about that and how that experience has landed for them. It's so interesting. But they now experience themselves as a Gemini, but that means that they're tropical Cancer. So hear that. That means all this while I've been looking at them as sidereal Cancer and evoking in a way all the Cancerian traits from them, because when you look for traits in someone, you will see them. This is why I'm a bit sort of, back and forth about this kind of psychological astrology, temperament and traits and all of that based on signs. I'm less interested in that as I am timelines, in terms of what is actually happening in your life, because you can pick any sign, and I could say to you any sign of the zodiac and start picking out traits, and you're going to start identifying with them. But at any rate, again, this person was identifying as sidereal Cancer. Now it's sidereal Gemini, which is tropical Cancer. And all of those years that I was looking at them as a Cancerian, indeed they are tropical Cancerian. And so you might say that, okay, is that a phantom sign then for them? In a way, yes, I do think so. But in another way, it is also possible to evoke, to entice, even to pull out of this person Cancerian traits if you're looking for them. You have Cancerian traits. I have Cancerian traits. We all have Cancer somewhere. So you're going to be able to pull that out of the person more and more. If you're expecting to see it, you will see it. Read all about the expectation effect, and that will make sense to you. Why, when we expect something, it turns up over and over again. At any rate, this person now is identifying with the correct time and the correct star sign, sidereal Gemini. They're identifying as a Gemini. And lo and behold, in the last some months, I'm also now seeing them as a Gemini. And not only that, but I'm like, oh my God, how did I miss that? That's so obvious. I mean, it's so obvious they're Gemini. First of all, they're constantly, and this is going to sound cliche, but the thing is, it's important to recognize what does this mean when you say somebody's any sign. When we say a rising sign, it's their temperament, it's their character, it's their personality is marked by this sign. They still have Cancer. And Cancer, by the way, is going to be the second sign. And where they experience Cancer is through diet and food and nourishment, which is where we met on. We talked about this so much that it was like all of these Cancerian traits I thought were in their rising sign were actually in their second sign of food, which was a lot of what we talked about over the years. So just hear that we all have the signs, remember, but in different places. And if you think that it's in a certain place, but it's in another place, you're going to get confused. But when I look at them as a Gemini, I'm like, of course they're a Gemini. It's so obvious, but I wasn't looking at it before. They are so Gemini. I mean, physically they're Gemini. And I'm not going to get into that here because it's very hard to explain that on a podcast. I could show you slides and you can actually watch a video I made about sidereal signs being the actual physical traits of the person, not the tropical. I won't get into that again, but you can watch a video I made about that. And I hope I demonstrated that clearly, that your sidereal sign is your physical body, not your tropical sign. At any rate, when I look at them, I see only Gemini now. I only see Gemini. The character, the personality, they're constantly ready with a witty pun, an innuendo. They do not in any way speak straightforward. Everything has to be kind of like a joke or an innuendo, a double entendre, these kinds of things. They're constantly doing this. That's a Gemini trait. They're so Gemini that I'm like thinking to myself, how on earth did I not see this before? And of course, I wasn't seeing it because I wasn't looking for it. They were telling me they're Cancer and I'm going to look for Cancer traits. I'm going to see the Cancer traits, even if it were filtered through their experience through the second sign. So that if you can hear that, that's the most important point I'm going to make here. But the other thing to say about this, I want to bring up another example, and let's say a famous example in this case, a very famous example. And I could bring up so many, but anyway, this is just one, and that is of Madonna, the singer Madonna. Madonna for years, her birth chart has been, her time of birth has been cited on astro.com, and it's given as an AA rated time. So you're going to believe what you see with your own eyes. You go to astro.com and you search for Madonna Louise Chacon, and she was born on the 16th of August 1958 at 7:05 a.m. AA rated. The problem is that she wasn't born at 7:05 a.m. if we are to believe an interview that she gave some years ago where she says, because if you calculate 7:05 a.m. it would be a Leo ascendant, sidereal, star sign. And then you're going to say, okay, of course, this person's a Leo through and through. Madonna's a Leo. It's obvious. She's a performer. She's a Leo. Full stop. No questions asked. That's not actually true. If you watch interviews of her talking about astrology, she will say, oh, well, I'm an Aquarius ascendant and I'm a Virgo moon. And you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't fit. That means, and if you actually work it out, and she's referring to quite obviously tropical because she's a Westerner, then Aquarius ascendant Western tropical is more likely sidereal Capricorn. Capricorn, wait a minute, if I put in Capricorn, oh, there you go, 7:05 p.m., not a.m. So, what does that mean? What it means is astrologers, Vedic and Western, have been using Leo or whatever they've been using, and they've been using it simply, and I've literally got a note back from somebody when I brought this up to an astrologer years ago. And when I said, well, actually look at this interview and they're saying this, and so this time isn't correct. And if you put in Capricorn, it makes a lot more sense and it lines up. And they're like, their answer to that was simply, oh, well, this is what we've been always using. That was their answer. This is what we've always used. So in other words, what that is saying is we're going to stick with this sign because we've always used it. And that is literally what tropical astrologers are doing. We're going to stick with tropical signs because we've always used them for the last 2,000 years. So we're going to keep doing it. But the thing is, it's not the sign anymore. And in the Madonna's case, a good example of that is if you're going to look for Leo traits, you're going to find them. But actually, if you want to be truthful about it and you actually look at her character, her personality, her way of being, it's Capricorn through and through. She is a Capricorn. She has Leo, and we can pull that out of her because she has Leo moon and sun and Mercury. There's a lot of Leo going on in her chart. So she is a performer. She has that Leo moon. It's going to come out one way or the other. But as a physical body, as a being, as a temperament, she is Capricorn. Do you think that Madonna's a Leo when you actually think about it? She's not a Leo. She doesn't behave like a Leo. She's a very stern woman. She's a very Saturnine person. She's quite a Saturnine person in many different ways. And that just doesn't mean reserved. Saturnine can also means she's quite rebellious, and Saturn has lost that in the modern astrology era, I think, around its kind of rebelliousness. But she's a rebel in one way. She's outspoken in that way, but she's quite reserved. She's quite serious. She's no way, any way, shape or form, a Leo ascendant. I mean, if you're not going to be able to try and convince me that Madonna is a Leo ascendant. And now when I saw that interview, it was like, oh, this makes absolute sense. She is a Capricorn ascendant. So that's another example. It's like, again, a phantom sign. It just lingers and you think that's the person. And then it's reinforced by not just all the astrologers repeating it over and over again, but by media in general. Everything that's written, everything that has been written for hundreds of years is based on tropical signs, and it just has stuck. So my suggestion would be to let's unstuck this. Let's uproot this notion that you are your tropical sign, because I don't think you're your tropical sign. I think that's useful in terms of the season and only for the northern hemisphere, and then it needs to be flipped for the southern hemisphere. And otherwise, what are you looking at? If you're only thinking about the sun and the amount of light you're getting, you're divorcing it from the star signs completely. So what are you looking at then? You're literally going to have to wipe the stars clean and just look at the sun rising and setting and how much light you're getting during the year to say that that's your sign. What are you basing that on otherwise? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. There's no any kind of star-based anything going on otherwise. So it's time for us to progress with astrology. And, I'm thinking about people like Cyril Fagan, who was also an Irish astrologer, by the way, who is so adamant about this. And he didn't get anywhere in his lifetime in terms of the wider astrology community in one way. And yet in another way, he planted seeds of doubt in so many minds, and he encouraged and inspired so many others to follow the sidereal zodiac. And that's what we all got to do. If you're listening to this, I imagine that you are also, it's like maybe me preaching to the choir here. But if you do happen upon this podcast and you're a tropical astrologer, I would encourage you to open your mind at least to it. At the very least, to say when you're saying a sign, to say whether it's tropical or whatever you're using. And to be at least open-minded to the sidereal zodiac. And the reason why another reason why I think, maybe to end on this point, a lot of tropical astrologers are just not paying attention to the sidereal sign is because it's the sign before. It's the 12th sign from the tropical. So it's like the unconscious. I see it time and again where I see tropical astrologers online talk about their rising sign, and they're talking about traits of their rising sign. And I'm looking at them, I'm thinking, you don't in any way display traits of that rising sign. Look at the sign before, and they are the traits you're displaying. But they're not looking at that. It's the 12th from there. I even, in a conference once, asked an astrologer who was confused about their rising sign because they didn't know their time of birth. And they were trying to come up with stories about which sign it could be. And I asked a very simple, straightforward question. Did you ever think about maybe looking at yourself physically and try and delineate your rising sign based on the most obvious thing to say about the rising sign, your physical attributes? And they were completely dismissive of it and said, that's poo-poo. That's old astrology. It doesn't work. How can you do that? Therefore, you would have to do that with all kind of ethnic groups. That was their answer. And I was taken aback, first of all, because I was thinking to myself, wait a minute, is that not indeed what we're doing with all signs when we're giving any sign an attribute? I'm just talking about a physical attribute. Every time we say a sign like Aries, we say that there's certain attributes of Aries, right? So why cannot we say the physical attributes? Because indeed that's what the signs are. The rising sign is. It's a physical thing for the rising sign. Your second sign is your facial features. Your third sign, your arms and hands, and so on and so on. They are physical. But of course, then I realized after a while, and I didn't want to poke it anymore. I realized after a while, of course, the astrologer wasn't considering that because they're tropical astrologers. So they're not looking at the physical body when they're looking at tropical signs. I hope I made this point clear. Your tropical sign is not your physical body. Your rising sign, that is. Your rising sign in the sidereal zodiac is your physical body. They are the physical signs you're looking at when you look at the night sky. You're looking at stars. That is all I want to say about these phantom signs, the tropical signs. I don't know if this is going to catch on. I don't know if it's going to hit with you here. Again, I might be preaching to the choir. If you are a tropical astrologer, though, and you do hear this and you have comments, please, I'd love to hear your comments. If you have something that makes sense, I'd love to hear it. If you're just going to get reactive and think that, wait a minute, no, it works for me in practice. Yeah, it works in practice. Like I said with my friend, I was using their chart with a certain sign rising for years and it worked. You can make it work. But it's not true to say that that's your sign. You can still make it work. I can plug any, let's face it, I can use any Ainamsha and use any sign rising and read a chart, because we're all 360 degree, all of the chart. And I can start anywhere and start reading a chart, and I'll come up with quite a few delineations that would make a lot of sense. But is it true? You know, you really got to question, what are you looking at? So that is my 2 cents on this concept of the tropical signs being phantom signs. If you have any comments, any questions, I'd love to hear them. I'd just love to hear your thoughts on this, of course, because it is something I think that future generations are going to really have to deal with this more and more. It's not going away. It's just going to become more extreme. And I'm hoping that in the future, astrologers will be able to come together in some way, or just drift further apart, I guess, until it's so far apart that you just got to realize they're absolutely different. Okay, hope you enjoyed. Thank you for listening to this all the way through to the end. Until next time.